Hello, namaste, friends. Thank you for tuning in to the Divine Nobodies podcast. I'm your host, once again, Eric Ajna. I'm joined by my fellow altruistic lightworker in crime, Jennifer Lynn. How you doing, Jen?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Happy full moon in Aries.
Oh, okay.
You know, the energy is really, really intense, and Aries represents the warrior. It's also a fire sign, so if you're feeling extra spicy today, that could be why.
I'm feeling it.
Yeah, so if you're an action-oriented type of person, there's a lot of people talking about how intense the energy is, and I've definitely felt it. I've actually been a little bit more productive today.
That's good.
And then when we walked into the studio, it's an entirely new studio.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it feels really good in here.
New luck who... Oh, fuck.
Yeah.
You know what I was trying to say.
Yeah, exactly.
New luck who this?
Yeah.
What do the kids say? I don't know.
What?
The kids say something like new phone who dis?
New phone who dis?
Yeah, that's it. That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's definitely different and it feels good. And this signifies, of course, in moving forward. This is our inaugural episode in the new studio. So we have a really, really wonderful guest in the studio today.
Yes.
Just to sort of like join in on the celebration along with us.
Yeah, it's awesome. And a personal friend.
Yeah,
friend of the show.
Yeah, and also to bask in the energy of the full moon. So let's hope that all of our chakras are just blown open today, especially the throat.
Yes.
Yeah, so we have a really awesome fellow. We've been talking to him before the podcast, and he wrote a really, really interesting book. And he's going to discuss his story. And the book is actually called Finding Zoe Through Her Art. And he's going to discuss kind of like his journey and his story. And it's a really, really amazing story. We thought we'd actually bring him on because this guy's been on quite the journey, Jen.
Yes, quite the journey.
Yeah.
Luke, we're so happy to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, Luke.
It's amazing. Yeah, I've been feeling the energy today. Might be the fact that I'm on the podcast.
Yeah.
But I'm here to release my energy. Can't wait.
Oh, man, I'm so happy to have you. So I have had the pleasure of reading and seeing your mother's art and the book. So just give us like a brief synopsis of the book. Tell us about it.
So Finding Zoe Through Her Art is a son's journey to get to know his dead mother through her art. End tagline. So I've had to use that a lot, but you need that elevator pitch.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, my mom died when I was 18, and I'm 37 now. And at 18, I was a punk kid. Didn't really think too much about it. I was at college on the soccer team and a fraternity. And when my mom passed, it was supposed to be intense, but I feel that I let it just go on. And I didn't mourn so much. I went through the ceremonies. We spread the ashes, which seemed comical, and just moved on. And I didn't think much about it. And I think a lot of that had to do with the way my relationship with her was before that, where I was more of just an independent kid, had good grades at school, focused on soccer, but I don't have a lot of memories. I think it seemed sad. So as I got older and sort of in the 30s, I was in Chile on a long 12-hour drive up north. And I wrote a letter to her sort of saying, "Hey, Mom, just want to let you know, here I am. How's my life, my update?" At the time, I was married, had a dog, racing bikes. So just kind of let her know what you would in a postcard kind of thing.
Yeah.
But there's a part in that letter where I talk about how when I last saw her, she was in a walker. She had lupus and always struggled with lupus, big autoimmune deficiency.
Yeah.
And with that came so many complications, and part of that was she had a walker. So I remember going home, storming into the house, taking some food and clothes and whatever you do as a college kid when you go home. And she's like, "Look, don't. What do you think of my walker?" And she kind of comes in, and I remember thinking that it was fake or it wasn't real. I said, "That looks pathetic," and sort of ran out the door and wheelied away on my motorcycle into the sunset. And then a week later, she died. And that was the last I said to her was, "You look pathetic."
Yeah.
And I'm content with where I stand with that now. And I wouldn't say that was the whole goal of the book, but because of that, I did feel like, wow, there shouldn't be a line such like that. There must be a way to speak with people beyond just the end of that. And so I tried to make a bunch of money selling her art, because her art is, I think, objectively good.
Objectively good. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
Yeah, she's quite the artist. Yeah.
But it's the eye in the beholder so many times. When you look at it, it's like, oh, that's good. And you can see a lot of really good art. So what makes one piece of really good art stand out to the next piece of really good art? So I thought, I'm going to find the stories behind the pictures. And I have a few of them. And I just sort of made announcements on Facebook and Twitter saying, hey, if anybody knows where these pictures are, I'd love to know. And then people sort of came out of the woodwork and said, hey, I met your mom 30 years ago. She came here to visit me in the Appalachian Mountains and tells me the story of her painting the picture. And so that was just one of what I think there's about 20 some chapters in there.
Yeah. And we don't want you to give away all the stories on the show because we want to motivate people to get the book, right?
Yeah.
So tell us your favorite story out of the book. Do you have a favorite, like one encounter that you had that was really memorable that is just a great story?
Yeah. All the chapters are named after a person. And the Jeff chapter is maybe the longest, maybe the most of a story, while some of the other chapters are really quick. You could read them in a few minutes. Definitely a coffee table style read. The Jeff chapter is a full story of me visiting my mom's ex-husband before my dad. And I didn't know much about him. All I knew is that my mom was married before my dad. My grandparents had pictures of Jeff all throughout their house, but none of my dad. And I knew they never really got along.
Yeah.
But,
I guess that's obvious, right?
So what was the problem? I don't know. So I reached out to Jeff, got an email back 3 months later, and found out he's living in the northwest of the United States, on sort of the border of Canada and Washington. And a really cute little island, maybe 1,000 people live on it. To get there, you fly to Seattle, you drive 3 hours north, you get on a boat for 2 hours, and you get on the car and get to the other side and meet Jeff. And he's just a long-haired, good-looking older guy.
Yeah.
And I Googled him beforehand. So
You're almost dad.
Yeah, definitely. Well, he's like the anti-dad, really, if you think about it, because by his choices, I exist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which we would eventually get to in our sort of drunken nights in the middle of nowhere, because his house was so remote. And when I picked him up on the side of the road, I don't know why he was on the side of the road. We went to the local brewery, walked around, met maybe 20 people. He knew everybody, and everybody he had to introduce me to him. And he's like, this is my friend. And you could just see him struggle, but what would you say?
Yeah.
You would have to say
This is his father, right?
This is my ex's,
it's his mother's first husband.
Oh, okay.
Before his dad.
So I wasn't alive yet. So they lived the first love, I think. When you first, everything is just golden, rose tinted, everything. And they lived in Chatsworth. They had this nice farm. My mom was English. So all her family was in England. And he lived in Chatsworth, and they had this farm. She's really big into animals, I learned. So anyways, through these few days, I spent a week with Jeff and just asking about what was his life like with her.
You spent a week with him? I didn't realize that you were there for a week.
Yeah, it's a weird ask.
So you just call him. Yeah, that's a super weird ask.
And this was an attempt to just get to know your mother through his stories of his experience with her, right?
Yeah. I didn't have a necessarily a point, but I went there just to meet somebody who knew her in a time I wouldn't, because I knew her as a sick mother who was in bed a lot and wasn't as probably present as she could have been for me. And so as my perspective, that's what I saw.
And at the same time, I mean, around the time she passed away, you were also very young, right? You were like 18 years old.
18.
And if I were to think back of kind of where I was at 18, I mean, my life was all over the place.
Oh,
I mean, you're not as emotionally evolved as an 18-year-old, and you're just still trying to figure out who you are. Right. So I imagine there was the piece with your mother, but at the same time, you're sort of on this journey to find yourself. And I imagine that this kind of journey and discovering who your mother is sort of like filling in the gaps of trying to figure out kind of where you fall as well. Like I feel like it helps to understand your lineage.
Oh, 100%.
You know?
Yeah, there was always a battle of who I was then and who I am now. And am I him or am I a version of him? And I personally, my philosophy in that is I am my current self.
Yeah.
And I try and build on the past and move forward with intention.
Yeah, absolutely.
And don't dwell on it. Because there's people in my life who have a different relationship with their lost person in their life. And I find myself in this weird kind of brutish, non-sympathetic position because I don't show enough empathy for them because they're doing it in their own way. For me, I'd prefer to, and the book is a manifestation of my mom is still around in a new form.
Yeah.
And currently it takes the shape of this book and the people through the book. And it's nice to get that sense. I mean, they talk about ghosts and spirits in the world. When you go meet somebody who hadn't talked about Zoe for 30 years, and then they pull off a picture off the side of their wall that had always been up. Yeah. And they talk about the time when they first got there and they're broke people, but she knew Zoe needed some money. So she sort of asked, like, can you please make me a picture? Just add some spiders and some insects. And so, yeah, it's nice to see that time when, as a human, not a mom, like you just think your mom's there to feed you and take you to soccer practice. And so, yeah, it's nice to see that sort of friend side.
Yeah, it's funny how we take our family and our parents for granted when we're that young.
Oh, yeah.
You know, because you're just not in that state of development where you're appreciative of the things they're doing. It's like expected. So whenever she dies and you're 18 years old, you're still in that mind frame that they owe you something. Yeah. And it's so weird, you know, to be an adult now and look back on those relationships and you're like, they didn't know me shit.
Yeah. I had this conversation with somebody actually yesterday about the journey that children go through. And I think our modern society's interpretation is that at a certain age, maybe pre-puberty, the hormones start to kick in. And then they just all of a sudden just kind of come down with these, you know, little bouts of rage and they just seem so misunderstood. But the way that I see it is, you know, from 0 to maybe 10 or 11 years old, they're filled with all of these sort of hopes, dreams, and they have a really large imagination. I mean, if people up until that time are telling them that Santa Claus is real, Easter Bunny is real, all these different sort of avatars and archetypes exist. And as you get older, you start to realize that those things aren't real. And I think what children go through is that understanding and almost that acceptance of the fact that they've been lied to for a long time. And it's no surprise to me that when children get older, they become rebellious teenagers.
Yeah.
Because it's like, what can you believe if up until that point, you know, you imagined a very, very different life. And then I went through that. It's almost like that sort of archetypal journey that the spirit goes through. Every teenager goes through that sort of angry, angsty phase.
Every teenager goes through that.
You know?
And I totally fucking get it. Like, you know, I was raised very poor. My parents were very, very young and had a bunch of kids. So, you know, why would Santa Claus bring this person an Xbox and me a pair of socks?
Yeah.
You know, like I was a good girl this year.
Right. Yeah.
It's funny the way that we look at things whenever we're children. Yeah. But we digress. I want to finish your story.
So the Jeff story goes on where he tells me about the way he broke up with my mom or that's how it ended, because there was no story. My family didn't know. They all liked Jeff. They didn't really understand. All they knew is that Zoe's in America and something had happened. Keep in mind, back then, you would write letters and correspondence would take weeks.
Wax stamps.
Yeah, exactly.
Send it carrier pigeon.
So they had a party at their little farm in Chatsworth. And at the time, my dad, Dick, is traveling around with some rock bands. And he shows up at the party, and he's just kind of the life of the party.
Dick in the band? Yeah.
Dick in the band.
Richard in the band?
And so, again, this is how Jeff tells me this story. And so Jeff tells me the story. I'm just listening there, and we're in the middle of nowhere. We're looking over the view into Canada across the ocean. Apparently, there's orcas in the water. We didn't see any. And he tells me the story of how my dad shows up selling Coke at the party. At some point, Jeff looks down the hallway, sees my mom kissing my dad, and Jeff freaks out. Tells his friends are holding him back. Don't do anything. And from that, nothing came of it. But Jeff never forgave her. Never forgave her, and she would desperately try, like, Jeff, nothing happened. And 2 weeks later, Jeff got in the way he tells it, he was a bit aggravated, a little upset, and he goes for a bike ride in Ojai, California. Oh, I love Ojai. Known for a motorcycle ride, and I've done it a few times myself, and he ends up crashing, gets stuck under a car, burns 90% of his body. Wow. And at this point, he's kind of like telling me the story, and you can pull his shirt back, and you just see the burns on his body. great looking guy. You could totally, that's what everybody used to tell me, that he was a good looking guy.
Yeah.
And so he burned his body. He's in the hospital for 6 months. While he's there, he chooses to not let my mom visit. And during that time, she pulls away and just needs something and finds my dad, and they hit it off at that point.
And here you are.
And here I am. And I did thank him that. There was a moment I told Jeff, I said, Jeff, thank you, because I wouldn't be here. We couldn't have this conversation without your choices, because you could tell his regret was strong.
Yeah.
For not seeing her while he was in the hospital.
Yeah. He never forgave her. And now he does. And to loop it back to what you both just reminded me with what you're saying, how these Akashic records, which I just learned from you both, how it's not just everything, but it's all time at all times.
Yeah.
So it's talking to Jeff or Cindy or the Kathleen, the other people in this book, you get to hang out with a version of Zoe at that time and learn about it. And that was sort of me accessing that record at that point in time.
Yeah. That was your form of time travel.
Yeah. So what is one thing that you learned about your mom through Jeff?
She was violent, a lot of hitting. I think I saw her hit my dad a few times.
Yeah.
And sort of weird, in my head, these memories of like weird punches where you're just like, that's like not what you see on TV, just sort of just domestic, like, wow. And my dad will forever, ever love my mom and gave her everything. And I think he takes dislike to the book because I don't go deep into his story, because I think there's more to the story. And during the course of this book, I could only know Jeff's story. I couldn't know my dad's. So my dad's sort of unspoken at this point. So definitely want him to know, I know, but it presents this idea of who's real. What version of the memory exists? Because I have versions of my mom that are not what people have told me. And I tell them stuff and they don't know anything about all the self-harm she went to and the crazy lengths of like me spending 8 hours a day in the AA classes following her around and all these things where they're like, oh wow, didn't know all that. Yeah.
So it's almost like you're witnessing the fact that obviously your mom was on her own journey too. And it never really stops. And the beautiful thing I when you bring up the Akashic records is that came up for me is you essentially came from your mom. I mean, your lineage exists inside of your veins and that never ever stops. At one point you were actually her when, she was birthing you inside of her body. So we have our entire ancestry inside of our veins. So everything that you experience in some way, and I almost feel like this book, this memoir, this book that you created in an effort to try and understand her, it's almost awakening these sort of like the DNA of your mother inside of you that already exists. You know what I mean? And I saw the imagery in the book and it's phenomenal. And there's so many dimensions to the art. And it makes me curious as to kind of what ultimately was the message that she was trying to convey. But what when I'm looking at this one that almost looks like a butterfly. I would read this in the same way that I would read a tarot card an oracle card, because there's so much imagery here and it pulls from my own sort of experience. And that's the wonderful thing about the archetypal journey that the human and the spirit goes through, is that everybody can relate to pain, everybody can relate to happiness, and everybody can relate to the journey. And I feel 100%. Like this art almost in a way represents all of that. I can pull all those different type of emotions out of this image. So it makes me wonder, I mean, obviously what her intention was behind it, but I can see all of the anger that you're talking about that she conveyed when she was younger, or, her whole journey is in this artwork. It seems like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well put. I mean, what is an artist's goal in the end? To elicit that out of you. Yeah. And if you can.
Yeah. As an artist, like sometimes I don't know. Sometimes I really don't know what I'm trying to convey in a piece. It just kind of comes out on its own. And then in the end, I'm looking at it and like, ooh, yeah, okay, well, that one was a little darker, and half of the stuff that I do, I throw away. I don't even keep. So, I think that it's hard to identify exactly how you're feeling whenever you're beginning a piece. You don't really understand it until it's done, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's true. Like the creative sort of force of just creativity in general is a place that is obviously unnameable. It doesn't have a definition for it. It's like all the great music that exists comes from like I think an artist's real intention behind creating art is to try and express the inexpressible.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. That's exactly it.
Because you're not trying to convey words.
Right.
You're just trying to convey a feeling.
A feeling. Yeah.
You know?
And that's what art is a feeling. And if you're ever buying art or looking to purchase art, I tell people all the time, don't pick something that matches your house. Yeah. Pick something that elicits a feeling that makes you love it and that you're drawn to and that you derive pleasure from, because that's the art that you'll keep. If you're buying art that live, laugh, love, shit in the, golden green or whatever to match your couch.
Like the decor section at Target.
Oh, don't even get me started on that. Yeah. Yes. Don't buy your art from there. Really art is an expression of the insides of the artist, and, pick something that calls to you. Yeah.
Did you feel a lot of guilt for a long time? I mean, at what point did you stop maybe feeling guilty over kind of how you guys departed?
It wasn't a single moment, but it came. It wasn't, I don't think I intentionally meditated for that or looked for it. By virtue of talking through it and writing, and when you write and then edit and then triple edit and over again, you internalize it in a way that makes it comfortable.
Yeah.
And to the point where I think an interesting thought experiment always is like, well, what would you say if she was sitting right here in this podcast right now? Like what would you want to say to her? And I feel I could talk about that guilt directly to her. And you don't have to let it inside, because I think so much of like what you're just saying with this art is, I got tingles when you said it. It's an expression of a feeling, emotion, of something. Because I don't think my mom was definitely known for just fucking with people. She'd draw stuff just to piss them off, like make sure the boob was out, and she knew they didn't like boobies or something. and that's the emotion. But I think, to be honest, for her, it was her release. It was for her. She didn't sell any. The only time she sold any, she did an eagle on a gas tank for a Hell's Angel guy where we used to live. And the next day she had hundreds of orders, and then she turned them down, just said, I'm never doing it again. So the money wasn't a thing, probably to my dad's dismay. But she did it for herself. So the last chapter, I talk about Sherry, and Sherry was interesting because all I knew about Sherry was she triggered my mom, and that was told to me by certain people, and it's a weird one to hear, because you wonder, what does that mean, to trigger? And so my mom struggled with alcoholism, depression. I knew she hurt herself, and
Sherry was a friend.
Sherry was her best friend growing up, and Sherry was the daughter of another pilot. My mom was the daughter of a pilot. And they would pilot in England and pilot in San Francisco, and they would swap kids effectively, so the pilots could so oftentimes they'd end up in San Francisco, or oftentimes you'd end up traveling to Morocco with Sherry in their sort of early 20s. So plenty of stories.
Cool. Wow.
Of that goes. But Sherry she is an intense individual to be around. She's one of these people I think she's a beautiful person, and inside and out, does it slightly obliquely to the rest of us, where you have to be on your guard, in almost for me to stop reacting in a way I don't like to react. And I could see how my mom could have these reactions where Sherry would show up, and then Sherry talks about stories of my mom just dripping blood into a bucket. And I bring this up because you talk about the art as a way for her to get out. I mean, there's definitely some dark images in the book. There's even darker images elsewhere. And, people ask you like, well, what do you think that means? You just kind of want to go to the obvious. Like, I don't know, that looks like she had mother issues, and she suffered from depression. She felt like she was in a cage. Right. And you see these images and you can't look beyond that.
Where did you find the artwork initially? Like, did she have it just laying around her house? Did she have it like a kind of archived in books?
So they're pretty big. They're about anywhere from 1 to 3 feet, and pencil drawings. And we had some in frames, some not in frames. A lot were given away when she died. We had a memorial, and people just came to the house. And as a means of mourning, my dad chose to just get rid of everything. And that is also one of the stories in the book, which gets back to Sherry, where while we're shopping for a router, she confesses she thinks my dad killed my mom.
Wow.
What?
And the reason is my mom would confess to Sherry about this girl, Barb Rue, that my dad was talking about, seeing, and Barb Rue was his brother's ex-wife. So that was years ago, but nonetheless, two brothers, similar people. And the fact that my mom would say, like, she's like, I don't know, like, they seem to be talking a lot. So then after my mom passed, within, I can't remember the time frame, I think it's like a year and a half, he was married to Barb Rue. Now, he definitely didn't do it for financial gain, that's for sure, as it probably left him worse off. But nonetheless, for people like Sherry, who heard that, and then time goes by, here's Zoe passes, time goes by, now my dad's married to Barb Rue, you could see how people could come to that logical conclusion.
Yeah, for sure.
And knowing my dad, it's nothing to do with it. I think it's just a matter of you get to that time in life, if anybody shows you affection and you relate to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're both grieving, like that's super common with people who are grieving the death of a mutual person. You know, to end up together. Like there's, I don't know, some comfort in grief.
My dad would say how I think he was resentful of Sherry because as good as a friend as she wasn't appropriately a friend at the end.
Yeah.
And when people are really stressing the line of suicide, hurting themselves, being sick, and Sherry didn't seem to grasp that. She's always not, she's sort of superficially understanding of people. So if you don't really have that deep empathy for people, it could be really annoying, really. And especially when somebody's severely sick. And my dad and my mom's other best friend, Lynn, were, I think, Sherry around didn't help, I feel.
Yeah. And you know, it's really tough. And I'm going to play devil's advocate here for Sherry because a lot of people really experience this with people who have autoimmune diseases. So your mom had lupus. And I have ankylosing spondylitis, which is also an autoimmune disease and kind of in the same family. And it's invisible. So people don't really see it on you until you start to have loss of function and loss of movement. But it's very hard. It's not like cancer where you physically see someone decline and they're losing their hair and they're so weak and it just happens so rapidly. I mean, it's a slow progressing disease. So, you know, in Sherry's defense, I'm sure she knows your mother as a child and, you know, perfectly healthy. And as she got ill, as the years went on, it's such a slow progression. And it's something that you don't see. It's not like Jeff getting burned and there's burns and you can see that he's injured. You know, it's all happening inside on your joints and your organs. Yeah.
Well, it makes you hopeful that your true friends in life, as the years go by, can appreciate and love you in all your forms.
100%.
And it's totally tough when you don't see them in the middle. You don't know the transitions. You have to deal with it.
Yeah.
And just remind you that.
When I look at this artwork, though, by the way, I mean, coming from somebody that has been kind of immersed in the New Age sort of metaphysical world for a long time and seeing a lot of imagery from a lot of different artists. And obviously, even psychedelic artists or even just New Age artists, I mean, I see a lot of sort of spiritual themes in this. I mean, there's like a sort of like an eye here, and I'm just trying to describe this bird's eye view chapter where it has like a bird with its like wings open, and it has like this sort of eye that's illuminating this light. What are some things that you get from these images when you look at them? Like as far as feeling, like how do you interpret some of these images?
That particular one, so when she drew, she was very close to the paper.
Oh, really?
3 inches away. And I love that because in my programming that I do nowadays, it is a talent and a half I have to be able to keep large systems in my head without sort of seeing what the whole, like without like a visual.
Yeah.
And it just boggles my mind that she could have her eye 3 inches from that super detailed picture and pick out that little world at that point in that sphere and draw it to enough detail where it tells its story. And there's another one, if you could pull up the wasp.
Oh yeah.
The wasp is amazing. Cool. And the reason I so the wasp is on top of a tall opium plant, which I said it was a dandelion, and I've only since found out that my mom was big into opium. And
like she used to take it back in the day.
I think towards like with my dad and I hear this stuff and it makes me wonder when, I mean, there's definitely nights where I was the last guy at soccer practice and you're just sort of not getting picked up, and you got to eventually call your neighbor's mom to come get you. And you think, wow, maybe I wonder if she was just sort of in it. I mean, I don't know. I presume it's different than when I did it in the jungles of Thailand. It's probably a little different just in your house. So Opium was, she was the
then,
quintessential bohemian artist. I think. I feel like you could just see her in those scenes that we all have in our heads about it.
Yeah, I definitely feel that. Actually, I've shared this story with Jen before where I have a friend named Charlotte Victoria, and she is an artist now, but she wasn't always an artist. She had this sort of mystical experience one day, and she came back from it with the sudden urge to just start creating artwork. And she never picked up a pen and a paper before, and she wasn't really well versed in art, even when she tried back then. But when she came back from this experience, all of a sudden she just became this immaculate artist almost overnight.
Wow.
You know, and she's kind of on this journey of trying to figure out kind of where that came from. But I feel like just people intuitively tap into that creative sort of force. Maybe it exists on the fourth dimension, but when I see imagery like this, it makes me wonder of all of these images that they talk about in the fourth dimension, like Raymond Moody or Edgar Cayce, when they try and get artists, or when they themselves try and interpret this information through artwork, it has this sort of like whimsical, very ethereal, otherworldly quality. So there's this part of me that thinks, maybe would you think that she had these sort of intuitive, almost like psychic abilities of channeling that information on paper?
I'd like to think so.
Yeah.
We had more crystals than I've seen in this house, at our house.
Oh, really?
We had more animals than were appropriate for where we live. And from what I've heard, it's always been the case. There's all these, there's so many stories about birds landing on her, hummingbird landing on her finger, and her having a crow that she could call and it would land on her shoulder, and going to a field full of wild horses and one would show up and she would just ride it bareback. And the imagery is impressive to the point where you think, is it just making it up? But she always had a connection with animals. It comes out a lot in her art, probably predominantly is animal art.
Oh, yeah, she's got hummingbirds everywhere.
Definitely hummingbirds.
Yeah.
She had, all spiders had 6 legs, all insects had 4 legs. Even that wasp that you looked at
that's right.
had only 4.
That's
But
really
I brought up the wasp because I didn't know if there's more to it, because I've been told that wasp is a reflection as if they're in a window. So there's a bunch of windows throughout its reflection.
And there's so many layers
Right,
to the
there's-
wasp too. It's like you zoom in and it almost becomes this like fractal thing where it's like it's a wasp, but once you zoom in, it becomes so many different other things. There's a lot going on in there.
Yeah.
You know?
The wasp was, it's 3 feet tall by maybe 10 inches, cut into 3 separate pieces. When I took that because part of doing the book is to take the art, scan it, and then I can give it back to the owners or keep it. So it's digitally forever going to survive.
So she gave it away, but she also sold it.
She never sold it.
She never sold it.
No. So here I am finding it all, and just nobody's getting in my way, at least not yet. But that wasp, I blew up to 10 feet tall, and it currently hangs in my house. And it's a great example of me learning how to do hardwood and framing it and then hanging it in my house. And it looks spectacular. And a big thing I've gotten from this is not only just learning how to write a book and designing a book and producing something that telling the story, learning the videos and the podcasts and the whatever else you have to learn, but becoming or being able to say I was an artist. That was a big one for me. So I don't think I would have said that before. I think I was a programmer. Yeah, you could build cool stuff, but you wouldn't appreciate I wouldn't appreciate building stuff.
It's almost like the complexity is there though, because I mean, programming and coding is really, really complex. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
One thing that I respect about this and in your process of trying to understand your mother through the artwork is it's almost like you're trying to understand the purest aspect of who she is.
Yeah.
I mean, she can tell you stories, and people have told me tons of stories, but there's something about the way somebody conveys or tries to convey a feeling that is so much more pure. And it's not so much obscured by the way that the mind sort of articulates information.
Yeah.
You know, so I think this is a really, really beautiful.
I wonder if I would have appreciated the art like I do now if she was still around.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard to say. I would say probably not. When you're going through the grieving process, like this is an expression of your grief is doing this book, right? So my question is, do you feel like she's been present during the creation of this book? Like, because you had a very successful Kickstarter and, you know, the book is beautiful and a successful finished product. Did you feel her presence there helping you along the way?
Yeah. I felt her through me. She wasn't external. It was always me.
Mm-hmm.
And I would catch myself thinking like, oh, wow, I am my mom's son in that sense. And I believe that guilt we've mentioned already, there's so much that I was too good. I was the nerd's kid who gets the scholarship and get out of here, leave this home. Mm-hmm. And I didn't give it a chance to appreciate, as you mentioned, I am her.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's hard to accept because you think you're yourself, and it's not that I'm only her. I'm her with everything else.
Yeah, it's like there's this sage. They call him the sage of Arunachala. His name is Sri Ramana Maharshi from the East. He existed in Tiruvannamalai, India, back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and they called him the silent prophets. But the one interesting thing about him is when he passed away, when he left his body, he consciously decided to leave his body one day, and one of his followers came up to him and they're like, "Sir, we don't want you to go." And he's like, "Where could I go?" It's like, I'm always going to be here and I'm always going to be inside of you. Because I think what happens is when people pass away, you essentially become the purest form of consciousness. And that's undifferentiated between anything else that anybody else is. It's almost like she becomes the purest aspect of who you are. And it makes sense that you would be her and she would be you.
Yeah.
You know,
there's definitely a bit of a portal aspect to it where I'll meet people. And I had to avoid this theme being repeated too much in the book because it happened every time. But you'd meet these people, you talk to them, mention what you're doing and get talking with them. And you could just tell they would wander back to the time with her.
Really?
So I was her for them, at least to activate something in their head, some memory, some part of life that was buried, didn't want to remember. And I would get a slice of it. And I always felt a little bit, I was intruding. And I think at the beginning I felt I was intruding, and towards the end of it, I embraced it because I got a lot out of it myself. I was going through divorce, going through just tough part of life anyways myself. So it seemed like a nice place to hide, but it wasn't hiding. It was more in the open than anything. And it was nice to bring others with me.
Yeah. So when she used to share when those people that felt compelled to share stories with you, what was the energy of those? Were they happy stories? Were they all different types of memories?
They were happy stories, except for the people really close to her. And there, I have leads for the next book because there's another 20 plus pictures I got to find, and I got to write the stories there. Where I think it takes a darker turn. I think it's easy to recount the great memories we all have through our lives, but the long line of her story arc is a tough one, I think. And it's one that people don't like to talk about because you were around and you think maybe you could have done more or you could have avoided it. And I struggle a bit to even endeavor down that route. I got sort of the names and the numbers to start talking with. And it's scary to think that's the route, and maybe it's not. And I question myself that maybe that's not the direction I need to take. What is my intention with finding more? But I do know there's more to the story, that her story at least, that seems like it was like, why did she end up being depressed and suicidal and hurting herself? And there's that I don't think I touch on. In the book, it alludes to a bit, but each story is more of a flowery version. I think each one remembered that, and even some of them were flowery, but at the same time were around dark circumstances. But it made me feel that is life for all of us.
Right.
We all have a dark moment in our days. As energetic as I felt today and inspired to come here, you still feel anxiety. You still feel these things. So it's nice to feel the raw human. So all the names in that book, I definitely have to thank them for so much, because it was them, by them revealing themselves, I found myself, and I feel that I am my mom. So by finding myself, I could find my mom, which was just amazing.
That's a beautiful story. When I think of that whole journey, I mean, it sounds like a journey that someone would take in an effort to find God. You know what I mean? And essentially, I think that's what everybody's doing, just in different ways. It reminds me of this this movie that I watched a while back. It was about Ram Dass, right? And if you're familiar with Ram Dass, was really like a really prolific Eastern teacher, but was also based in the West. And he was a Harvard professor that turned into an Eastern spiritual teacher during the sort of Timothy Leary tune in and drop out phases of the 60s. And there, in this movie, it's actually called Fierce Grace, there was a couple whose daughter committed suicide, and they were just so just destroyed, completely destroyed their family. And they wrote a letter to Ram Dass, and he invited them to come and see him. So they came down to meet with Ram Dass, and of course they shared the story. They couldn't understand why it happened. And Ram Dass, just in a really graceful, sort of eloquent way, was just like, you know, in the end, you guys did give birth to her, but she's a child of the universe, and people come to Earth for very specific types of work. And she did all the work that she needed to do. And she had decided prior to this life to touch the people and help the people in her life evolve. And then when her work was done, she left. And we see the aspect of suicide as being a negative thing. But in the grand scheme of how Source works, it's not looked at so much in a really negative way. I mean, anytime somebody leaves the earth, it's looked at as an unfortunate thing. She had to go out some way. And what I think when the process of somebody committing suicide is the impact that they make on other people, right? What ended up happening was it set you on this journey to finding yourself. And that could have been her job. That could have been her work. That could have been lifetimes and lifetimes of work of, you know, wanting to do this compassionate work for other people. But the beautiful thing about what you're telling me as this story is it got you to start really, really like looking into the deeper aspects of life and who she is and who you are. I think that's a beautiful process.
Yeah.
Wow,
and I'd like to comment on that too, because I know you as a personal friend. And as the Luke that I know is very cerebral, and you just kind of say what's on your mind, and, you know, everything is kind of based in fact or based in science. So I think feeling is something that you kind of struggle with. So this book, I have seen in the process of this book coming to fruition, you opening up a little bit more and emotionally. And I think that that's great, and probably, well, almost definitely the process, right? Like part of her mission.
Yeah, it's like she's your guru.
Yeah,
she's your teacher.
Yeah, you both just gave me tingles there. Yeah, like her final art piece. Here I am.
Her final art piece.
Oh,
Absolutely.
I love that.
I love that.
Absolutely. We're like a living embodiment of her artwork.
Yeah, it's
You
great.
know what? You should put that as the last page in your second book.
Oh, that is good.
Yeah, a picture of you as her final art piece.
Yeah.
And how it's changed you.
Yeah, ending the book was tough because I don't know what the end is. It's more, I felt good, but I do feel, I think the last chapter is Luke and Zoe. I started with Luke, and then it's Luke and Zoe. And it was cathartic for sure. There's definitely a lot of experiences. I mean, behind the scenes, there's also the desire to travel, the desire to just meet new people, which she had that in spades. Yeah. So again, to learn about that and realize like, oh yeah, that's your mother for sure.
Have you tried picking up a pencil and maybe some brushes and tried to make some art?
I haven't. I've done a few the wine nights or Pictionary games, but no, I haven't. I wonder.
Imagine.
But Jen knows all too well. I've built a huge giant art piece for Burning Man this 2 years ago.
Oh, wow.
You did, yeah.
And it took me 6 months in this big cloud room and turned into a place where people were fucking and we were catching humans with goggles covered in lights.
That's how you know you make it, man.
Yeah.
You got the burners in there fucking.
Yeah. And that turned into me taking a room in my house and covering the ceiling and making it sound reactive. And that would be actually good sound for this room.
So
Yeah, and my husband was like, "Oh yeah, we need to do the cloud room like Luke has in his room in our kitchen." I was like, no, we're not gonna do the cloud room in our kitchen." He's just,
Did you do a cloud room?
Yeah.
Thing? It was at a Burning Man.
Yeah.
I feel like I saw pictures or video of it.
Yeah, you
where
did.
people like were like laying on their back, and there was just sort of like these
Yeah.
clouds, sort of like formations.
Yeah. And then I put a red button that you would press it and it would change the lights.
And that was you.
Yeah, if it was that big, it wasn't. Mine was a 10-foot square or cube.
Yeah.
So if you saw something big, it wasn't me.
It was something like that. So you actually had it showcased, and you had an art installation at Burning
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh wow!
Sure
How long? Was that the first one that you did, or did you do them before?
It was my second year going. The first year I didn't do anything. The second year you immediately think I must build, must contribute.
Like
You don't have to.
inspired.
And spent the better part of 20 grand to build a wooden room with Mylar that was definitely a little sloppy.
Yeah.
That reflected the sides.
Yeah.
Some 2,800 LEDs running in it. Used nets and doll stuffing for the clouds.
What do you think it is about Burning Man that inspires people to create art, or at least for you?
For me, it was the feeling that everybody else made such compelling and amazing and it just impresses the hell out of you stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I felt I had to give back,
Mm-hmm.
which is a trait I have in life. I feel in general, if Jen invites me over for dinner and we have a good time, like just feel compelled to either invite back a dinner or send flowers. It's just part of leaving a place better than where you left it, which is improvement.
Yeah, I love that. Are you going to do another? I mean, did you have another one planned for this year? I know they had a virtual one this year, but are you going to continue making art for Burning Man?
Yeah, I want to make long distance lights that are sort of 10-foot poles that you can control.
Mm-hmm.
And because you have a vast expanse of darkness you can use. So come up with a way to do a big story.
A giant COVID stick.
A giant COVID stick would be cool.
How does it feel when you see people enjoying your artwork at Burning Man?
It was amazing.
Yeah.
There were the few times there's 2 people I saw having sex in there. There's another time I saw like 12 people all cuddled up in there, and then I storm in. Don't know what I was on, but I storm in there, slam on the red button, and change the light, and they're all ooh. But by far and away, one of my better memories that trip was fishing for humans, because you put a goggle with some lights on it and you cast it out into the middle of the road. So there's a picture of me with like my captain outfit and just reeling it in. And then when somebody would bend over to grab the light, I'd pull it away.
Yeah.
Suck them in.
It's like you never know how you impact other people. I mean, especially at Burning Man. I mean, that couple that was making love in that space, or the people that were enjoying it. I mean, I have a lot of friends that go to Burning Man, and they talk about it like it's just heaven on earth. And I believe them. And I've been to just various other transformational festivals, which I imagine are kind of varying degrees of what Burning Man is, but it changes their life in a way that most people can't imagine unless they go to a place like that. So I imagine I've heard people talking about different types of artwork there and how much it impacted them. So I just think of all the people that enjoyed that piece that probably have that memory, and they'll be able to take that memory with them, you know?
The problem I have with the book is I struggle to commit to saying I'm an author. Even in my bio coming here, I say I'm a programmer. And I'm not willing to commit 100% into being an author and promoting the book and only doing this. I got 2,000 of those books in a garage not too far from here. Better do something with them, right? But at Burning Man, you quickly fall headfirst into a thing that takes you to the brink of madness. And in the regular world, we don't have that. And this is why CrossFit became so popular, because CrossFit, within 8 minutes, suddenly your heart rate's at 220 beats and you've never been here before, and you feel it, just the endorphins are crazy.
Like pushing
and they got you there without telling you. Yeah. And at Burning Man, suddenly you have to really take yourselves to almost extinction, and then it all comes together. And that sort of release, that satisfaction, add a few psychedelics involved, is a feeling you can't replicate. And we should. I think in the real life, if we can make our work so intense and so free of fail safes where everybody doesn't really want to commit to trying something, okay to fail, try experimentation, I think we'd be better off. There would be obviously some failures and errors, but at the same time, you'd innovate and you can go higher as opposed to the status quo that I think it's just safer.
Yeah.
Just ride the safe car. Don't get on the bike, even though the bike's the right way to go. But everybody's scared of bikes.
It seems like you are kind of taking, I see the influence and the fact that obviously your mother was an artist and you're also an artist too. And it's almost like she is living through you in some ways. Do you ever thought of like maybe taking her art and making them into installations?
Yes.
Yeah.
That would be so cool.
So I've already done, there's a dandelion. I don't know if you've seen that one. The dandelion is one of my favorite. I'm a Leo. Luke Edward Ollett. So there's a hippie mom getting involved, spelling my initials.
Leo the lion. That's
I'm a Leo.
How she named the lion photo.
Yeah.
I wanted to say that your mom is probably also a psychic because I'm looking at Luke and Tuffy the tripod, and the hummingbird is holding a cube, and you are holding a pencil. So a pencil as an author, and the cube from Burning Man.
Wow.
So that's supposed to be, that's him, right?
Yeah, that's
I
him.
didn't put that together.
Look at that.
Shit.
Yeah, look at that cat.
And
we got Tuffy the tripod out of the garage
the three-legged cat.
And then, the books are all the stories that you're probably compiling
right
of hers.
Yeah, that's a good point. Don't think of that.
And then you're standing and I'm just reading this in the same way that I would intuitively read cards. And based off of the information that you shared with me, the fact that you're on these books, I think shows that these books elevated you to a certain place of awareness to where you're able to recognize what this bird is showing you.
Yeah.
And the structure of that bird, just like Jen says, is obviously a piece that you probably find at Burning Man. And then I feel like I see like this little moon-like structure as sort of like source behind you, kind of has your back that's guiding you to this bird. It's guiding you to this place,
Yeah.
I love
that. Maybe programming isn't the way. Maybe you're supposed to be an artist and an author.
Yeah.
And it's not an easy process.
It's not.
The best art comes from, it's like in Buddhism where they call it Mara, and then in Hinduism they call it the Leela, which is the divine play. And the divine drama is basically the polarities coexisting with one another, which is, you have to acknowledge that the shadow exists in unison with the light. Like they both, and this is what I've talked to Jen about this before. When I think of beauty, like when I think of intrinsic beauty, I think of it as happiness and sadness and love and pain in balance. Like when I listen to a song that's really, truly beautiful, or when I read a book that is really, really, truly beautiful, it has the suffering in there. It has that beautiful journey of the light and the shadow, because how do you get to that place? How do you get to that place of understanding unless you've gone to the depths of what I guess the absence of that would be,
Yeah.
You got to challenge yourself. Have you heard of the imperfect piano that Keith Jarrett does, the Köln concert?
Oh no, what is that?
And he has to do a concert, an improvisational jazz concert to 4,000 people somewhere in Köln, Germany, I believe. And he gets there and he doesn't have the right piano. It's not tuned. And he says, I won't play. And because the organizer begged and pleaded, he said, fine, I'll play. But don't expect anything great. And out of that untuned bad piano came the most sold piano album ever.
Wow.
Yeah. And when you listen to it, it has this, what you're saying, where it has the sadness, it has the happiness, it has, you can hear him struggling with the piano, but through that struggle comes amazing music and ultimately like unending fame.
You remember that piano we had in our house that I painted? I painted red. It was Ryan's grandmother's piano, and when she passed away, nobody in the family wanted the piano. So he was like, hey, do we have a spot for it? I was like, sure do. Bring that piano on over here. So I painted it, and then Eric came over one night and played it, and it was so out of tune. It sounded like a haunted house, like
the haunted mansion.
The haunted mansion. It was like, he was like, this piano's really out of tune. I was like, yeah, I could tell.
Yeah. That was the best out of tune piano I played, though.
It was good. It was good.
Have you heard of oblique strategies?
No. What
The
is
idea is to read a card. Like, so you want to solve. I want to learn how to do. I want to learn how to do better podcasts, or I want to learn how to speak without saying like and or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then you address that problem, and you turn over a card, and it says, "How do you build a wall without bricks?" That's all it says. And you have to apply that thought to your desire to not use hesitation words or whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
And by doing that, your brain suddenly switches a little bit, just thinks of the problems obliquely and it's slightly different.
It just makes a different pathway.
Yeah, exactly. And I confess I don't do it enough, and I fall victim to delay tactics, whether it be booze or drugs or just watching TV.
Yeah.
And it sucks to think that I should be challenging myself more. Those oblique strategies can help you do that.
Yeah. It's like what Deepak Chopra says when they're like, don't think outside of the box, just get rid of the box.
Right.
Because essentially every sort of idea in a lot of ways is, we're all, I think, in consciousness collectively all together are all kind of, every thought that exists, everything that is said has been said before. Right. So we're all just trying to recreate various levels of the same thing. But when we tap into the creative realm, it really involves that we get out of our heads and just tap more into, I want to say maybe like the heart chakra, but more of a feeling based, because I know exactly what that's like too, because it can be so easy to get so technical and so sort of rational about art, and it ceases to be art when it becomes over intellectual.
Yeah.
So it's just about finding sort of like that balance and like really tapping into that creative sort of force.
So I'm going to digress a little bit because you brought up Deepak Chopra. So number one, I didn't know that he lived in La Jolla. He lives by us. Did you know that?
In La Jolla?
Yeah.
No, I didn't know that actually.
Yeah. So he lives in La Jolla.
I do know that the Deepak, the Chopra Institute is, I think, down in Ensenada, like down more towards, I think, San Diego.
Yeah. So makes sense because that's right by where he lives.
Yeah.
So I saw this article yesterday and I posted it because I thought it was like perfect timing with the election and the debate. Yeah, we're not going to get into that. But Deepak Chopra wrote an article for the New York Times, and it says how to have a disagreement like an adult, according to Deepak Chopra. Yeah. So if you haven't read that, it's really good. It's gives like 6 or 7 tips on how to have a disagreement with another
tips in
person.
There?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let's just go over them really quick.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
We'll see what Luke has to say about these tips.
I love
we'll
it.
Sort of kind of go together.
Okay. So step 1 is choose if you even want to engage. So I think that this is super important because sometimes somebody is just so heated,
right? And
they're at a 10 and you're at a 2, and maybe not the best time to engage.
They're not going to listen to anything that you say.
You got it,
right?
You got it.
It's like they got their cortisol and their adrenaline pumping through their veins. They can't even think correctly.
But also, you could be engaged. You could be at a 10, but then you need to somehow know, like, what am I arguing about? Sometimes you don't even know.
Yeah, that's true.
Rogan said something recently that really kind of stuck with me, and he was like, "Don't get married to your ideas, because the second you get married to your ideas, you start to defend them, and when you defend them, you stop learning."
That's
and
true.
I was like, "Oh man, that's so good."
Yeah, that is really good. I like that.
Fucking Rogan. All right, so step 2. Okay, you've decided to engage. So first, listen.
I like how he starts it with an okay.
Okay, all right.
It's all right.
So
you're gonna do this. You're gonna do this.
So first, listen, and listening is the most important part of a conversation. It's not what you say,
right?
Really,
that's like holding space.
Yeah.
But it's also, you have to listen like level 3 or whatever it is, because that first level of listening, you're like and you got your answer ready to go before they finish their sentence.
That's true. Right. And I imagine, at that point, it takes a lot of discipline and courage to just really be patient, because it's not like just as easy as just sitting and listening. This guy's probably, externalizing a lot of different things that perhaps maybe you don't even want to hear.
Oh, for sure. That's step 3. Learn about the other person's values.
Oh, yeah.
So, you never know where people come from. And
is this like before the argument?
Yeah, before the argument.
You do your recon.
Yeah, just learn about their history, because a lot of people are set in a certain way and have a certain opinion because of their history.
Right.
Perfect example. I'll give an example. So I'm not big on flu shots, mostly because I have a weakened immune system, and anytime I take the flu shot, I get the flu. So I don't like to take it. Right. But some people don't take it because there are risk of ALS. So, or was it ALS or
I just the
myasthenia
people
gravis. There's some muscular disease that is a risk that you can get from the flu shot. Yeah. And I actually met someone whose father-in-law got it from the flu shot. So she doesn't take the flu shot for that reason, and she absolutely refuses. And that makes sense to me, right? Because she has a history with that, and she doesn't do it because there is proof that she has seen in her life that this could happen. And it's not worth it. Fuck it, I'll have the flu.
So it almost sounds like just respecting the fact that somebody may have differing opinions.
Yes.
You know.
Right. Okay, step 4, try awareness and a pause.
Yeah.
Pregnant pauses are great.
The power of the pause.
Yeah, that's what really I think too. Like whenever it comes to like a really, really important decision, and I actually heard somebody talking about this on Instagram the other day too, where it was just like they just to kind of put it into context, they were thinking of buying a house because they just had a child, and they almost impulse buy a home. And they just said, if you're going to make a really important decision, like give it some time, like go to sleep, wake up. They had clarity when they woke up. You can't even explain how or why that even happens. But I've had that before when you're like in an argument, and in the moment, it's really, really hard to pull away from it because there's this incentive, like there's this yearning to want a certain outcome. But if you really develop the discipline to just give yourself some space and your partner, you can come back with a completely different set of eyes that isn't being motivated by those neurotransmitters, you know?
Okay. And I just fact checked myself again. Second time. The flu shot, in very rare cases can give you Guillain-Barré.
What is that?
It's a disorder. I can't remember if it's the outside in or the inside out, kind of like, MS, where you like totally get paralyzed. And it paralyzes your lungs and you die.
I mean, I know a lot of people that just don't do the flu shot just for spiritual reasons. I mean, obviously it's a virus, it's a foreign thing. And I kind of take that stance too. I mean, nature is moderating my life force, and it's time for me to go. It's time for me to go.
For sure.
I feel like it's like I'm never going to think that I know more than my body does, you know?
That makes sense.
My buddy just moved to Idaho so he can have his own rights and beliefs about flu shots and guns and libertarian ideals.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Step 5. Don't engage in black and white thinking. So this is back to what Joe Rogan says. Don't get married to your ideas.
Yeah.
Don't get married.
Yeah, because black and white thinking, it's obviously polarizing.
Yeah.
Right? It's either you're on my side or you're on their side. And there's no in between.
Yeah.
And even when I mean, we've all heard this before, even when you've won an argument, there's still a loser.
Yeah.
And even when you won, you obviously still lose because there's somebody that is hurting over the fact that you're right.
Yeah.
You know?
Or hurting over the fact that you think you're right and you're not.
Exactly.
I mean, so there's that too.
Yeah.
Okay. So step 6, when confronted, stop, take a deep breath, smile, and then make a choice.
Wait, say that one more time.
When confronted, stop, take a deep breath, smile, and then make a choice.
I don't know about the smile part.
I know. I do know about the smile part because the smile, anytime you smile, even if you're not happy, when you smile, it elicits that emotion of happiness.
Oh, I see. So it's not so they can see.
It's not so they can see you smile.
They'd be like, "What are you smiling for?" But I understand what you're saying. This is more for self-care.
Yes.
Yeah. So just make sure that they don't see you smiling.
I think is that
because when you're arguing with someone and you smile, like, well, actually, no. Sometimes that's good because it can lighten the mood.
That's true.
Yeah.
It depends on how you do it, though.
Which leads to step 7. Don't try to prove them wrong.
Right.
So, when you're having a conversation, it needs to be diplomatic, right? And you're not trying to change someone's ideas.
Yeah, that just takes a whole lot of awareness, right? So I think that ties that back to holding space for somebody.
100%. Okay, so step 8, be prepared to forgive.
No.
And
all kinds of forgiveness.
And step 9, this is my favorite one, make a gentle joke.
Oh, yeah, a pun.
Yeah.
Puns are always good in moments like that.
Yeah, totally. Or a joke or, but make a tasteful joke. Because sometimes people make jokes and it's even more offensive and then it just adds flames to the fire,
Yeah.
Be careful with your joke. But
yeah, it's got to be carefully.
Unrelated to the topic, right?
Right, exactly.
And not attacking the person.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Something really innocent.
Yeah, I learned don't tell somebody to calm down.
Oh, never. Oh my God. That's the worst one.
I actually got a quote.
Or relax.
Relax. Yeah, somebody woke up on the wrong side of the bed. Doesn't help.
Relax.
I think another good, actual, useful one is to talk about it ahead of time and have that safe word.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Mine is balaclava. So if I hear balaclava, I know I'm hyper. I'm overreacting, or I'm just something. So if somebody says that to me, I'm like, all right, I trust my friends who know the safe word.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
You haven't known this yet, Jen.
Can you pick a easier safe word?
Sounds like baklava.
Baklava. I know.
Baklava is the face mask that you wear for like if you're robbing a bank. That's a balaclava.
Oh.
Okay, I will not remember that. So if I say baklava, you'll know what I mean.
Or you can just say safe word.
Yeah, safe word.
Safe word.
Safe word.
I think those are really, really good things to use in a relationship. Right?
True. I guess an argument and a relationship argument is different.
Yeah, I think that I've put that into practice. I think in relationships in the past, where it's like, hey, the second you see me being triggered, or you see me going to this place, and inevitably that happens in relationships where, I mean, you're two different people joining together to really engage in just almost like this form of really complex alchemy. I mean, I tell this to Jen before, which is like, you spend 30 plus years of your life without this person in your life, and then you finally meet them at age 30, and we somehow expect them to understand us 100%. So those sort of like triggers and those shadow aspects, especially in a partner that knows everything about you, are going to come out. Yeah. So I think that's so important for that compassion to exist. And that really comes down to like communication and meeting each other and developing things like what you're talking about, like safe words,
Picking a time in the future or place is a good one.
Yeah.
We're drunk, we're tired. Let's tomorrow, 9 a.m. Let's have breakfast. Let's talk about it. You go sleep. You want to go out? I'm going to stay here.
Yeah.
I think those are at least right now good tools. We'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you're an empath like Eric and I, and you know that someone is upset with you or you're about to have a hard conversation, it's like blood pressure goes up, immediately start sweating, heart rate goes up, and it's really hard to focus. So for me, I don't do well in those situations. I'm better like after the fact.
Huh.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to do more listening whenever I have those conversations, and then, kind of calm down. And when I get to a calm place, then going back to revisit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is kind of seems like you're, I don't know.
Like for me,
digging into an old wound, but.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear what you're saying, but some people just need space and time.
Yeah.
Time to process emotions and time to process feelings. But I'm one of those people that I want to get at it in the moment, which it doesn't always happen that way because everybody's different. But
is being an empath mean you can turn it on or off, or are you just sort of the giver of society? I don't know if you read that book.
I wouldn't say that it's a turning off or on thing. I think it's just a really hypersensitivity to the energy of other people.
Yeah.
And you develop practices to either cope or learn how to deal with and use that energy in the right way. That's what I think it's about.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So my last question, if you had something to leave with our listeners, one thing, what would it be?
To not let your relationships end when you think they're done. And it doesn't necessarily have to be death. Death takes form in many ways. Reach out to the people that you think there's nothing left there. Maybe you thought it was a dead relationship, but with my mom, there's so much more I found through this book, through the people I met through the book, that it's a shame that conversations have to stop.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they're hard. Sometimes you don't want to say them, but keep having those conversations with the people close to you and maybe reach out to the people far from you. Having an international family was always tough for me, and I need to do better at reaching out to them. And
we didn't even touch on that about your most recent move to Europe and what you're up to.
Give me a reason to invite me back on the podcast.
Yeah, 100%. We'd love to have you. We'll have to Zoom you because you live in Europe.
That's true.
Where can people find the book?
So you can go to zoepayne.com, ZOEPAYNE.com.
Mm-hmm.
And then...
Do you have an IG? Are you on Instagram?
Zoe Through Her Art everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, Zoe is a good name.
And do you have that art for sale? that people
Yeah,
can
so
purchase
right
if they
now I'm
like it?
doing prints for one of 50. I've sold 10.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Jen, for being one of those 10.
Oh, yes.
It is a unique collection where you get to pick your print from the website, and you can get any size within reason.
Yeah.
And the idea is that 50 will be a unique run that will be for it's so unique because it's based on the collection that people choose.
So I'm looking at the website. Is that her picture?
Uh-huh.
She was obviously very young there, right?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. That's really, really cool. Are you, and as far as your also your Burning Man art, because that's something that's really interesting to me too. Do you have a website or somewhere where you can kind of post that, or maybe send updates about what you're going to be doing with that?
Yeah, I'll share that with you, and you can post it. I don't have nothing came from that. I learned how to be a micro electronics soldering person from that.
Yeah.
So that's my art from that, but it's
And
not
taught my
it's not that
husband.
sexy.
And now we have a light up
Oh, is
island
that-
in our kitchen.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
that's how, Jeremy learned from him.
Oh, how to program all those lights.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Did you see that? You saw
Yeah,
it, right? Oh,
it's
man.
amazing.
Oh, yeah. Luke was here when we didn't have anything in this house. It was just like plywood floors.
That was right before I went to England, right before lockdown, where I wrote on a napkin, Jeremy, here you go.
Yeah, here's how you do it. See you later.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming in. And it's very, very nice to meet you. I know you've been friends with Jen for a long time. She said a lot of really amazing things about you. So it was nice to have you in and to talk about your journey.
Yeah, thanks, Eric.
Here.
Thanks, Jen. This has been amazing. I know I came in here nervous, but I feel, although still sweaty, but very, very, very relaxed. I feel great.
So there's a reason why you feel sweaty. So I was text messaging Jeremy to turn the air on. I was like, we're sweating in here. We're dying. And he goes, oh, I thought you meant turn the air off. And I was like, no, it's 90 degrees in here.
okay.
For those of you watching, we're all very hot.
I'm actually
Listening.
really, really cool now.
Now, yes,
Yeah,
now.
we found a nice balance. Well, you could welcome back anytime on the show. Just let us know. Stop by.
Yeah.
We'll have
That's
just
great.
like a conversation
fun.
about whatever. So everybody that's listening, we're also going to be posting a couple, I think, new platforms. We talked about this, I think, in the last episode. We're on Spotify, iHeartRadio. I forgot one last time. Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google,
Apple Podcast.
Apple Podcast, YouTube. And I think that's pretty much it, right?
That's it.
So the visual component of it will be on YouTube. So we'll be able to see this talk, and you guys can download it on whatever platform is comfortable for you. You could also go directly to our website at www.divine-nobodies.com. And I think I covered everything, right?
That's it.
Yeah. We'll keep everybody up to date. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you, everybody, for listening. Namaste.
Namaste, friends.
Namaste.